Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason DeRozier. I am the Senior Planner for Housing and Public Engagement with the Old Colony Planning Council, joined by my colleague, Lori Muncie. She's my boss, not necessarily my colleague, and we're joined by a couple of members of the Open Space and Recreation Plan Steering Committee, Leanne and Brian. So this evening we're here to talk about the updated Open Space and Recreation Plan for the town of Whitman. It is updated, or it is being updated. The last one was done in 2000. And so a lot has changed over the last 24 years. And so making sure that the updated plan meets the needs and priorities of what is a changing and shifting community with changing and shifting needs. So just by way of introduction, the Old Colony Planning Council was established in 1967. We are a regional planning agency with a focus on comprehensive development. The main objective of OCPC is to improve the physical, social, and economic conditions of the district. So we have planners on staff who do economic development planning, transportation planning, housing planning, open space and recreation sort of plans, sustainability planning. So it kind of runs the gamut. The OCPC region is comprised of the 17 communities up there. So it goes from Stoughton and Avon to sort of the northernmost side all the way down to Plymouth. And so we have a robust region of the South Shore. And we engage in various planning disciplines, as was referenced earlier, in terms of transportation, sustainability, open space, housing, etc. So just looking ahead a little bit, what we are going to be doing as part of the Open Space and Recreation Plan is drafting specific language for goals, objectives, and actions for the plan, developing a public participation plan. So we have a survey that's out, that's live. Many of you may have filled out that survey already. If you have not, there are little flyers up on this front table with a QR code and a link for the survey. We want to make sure that we don't necessarily expect or need every resident in the town of Whitman to respond to the survey, but we want to make sure that we have a robust enough response rate that we can sort of use that in determining specific needs and priorities. Data collection, this includes a parcel inventory, an ADA assessment or an ADA inventory, and then an analysis of needs, and a brief analysis of demographics in Whitman, and then analyzing resource protection needs and management areas, particularly as it relates to wetlands and vernal pools, those sorts of conservation spaces. So what is an open space and recreation plan? So it provides a roadmap for prioritizing open space and recreation projects and expenditures. It's a prerequisite for the Massachusetts Division of Conservation Service grants, and so if the town seeks to apply for or receive Division of Conservation Service grants, this is a prerequisite for that. There's a public process that's part of it. Like I said, the survey, this public meeting. I'm going to be doing some focus groups and sort of like key target stakeholder interviews with folks at the Council on Aging, trying to do one with some young folks over at the high school, making sure that we're connecting with the various users of the parks in spaces that make sense to them, to make sure that we're hearing about the various ways that people utilize these spaces and make sure that their needs and priorities are also reflected in the overall plan. The plan components, there's a summary and introduction, community setting, so this is sort of like a background of Whitman, some demographic data. There's an environmental inventory of open space and recreation spaces in Whitman, a deep analysis of wetlands, vernal pools, sort of invasive species, all of these things that are important to know from a conservation perspective. Some community goals, analysis of needs, goals and objectives, a 5-year action plan, and then all the public comments that were received as part of the survey will be in the plan, as well as the complete ADA inventory. So just by way of background, what is open space? Open space can be a lot of different things. It's not just an open field or a park. It includes conservation land, forested lands, agricultural land, athletic fields, playgrounds, small pocket parks or tot lots, green buffers along roadways and or undeveloped land of conservation and or recreation interest. So in Whitman, for example, we have Hobart Pond, Whitman Middle School softball field, and the town forest, just to name a few. So the map on the side is sort of the current land use map. Anything that's orange, a shade of orange or somewhat yellow orange is residential. Green is obviously green space, open land. Blue is commercial and purple is industrial. As you notice from the Whitman land use map, most of the land in Whitman is zoned as residential. We're a very residential community. And so making sure that we are stewarding our current open space responsibly is important, as well as identifying additional acquisitions of open space recreational facilities that the town may need is going to be part of this plan as well. And this just sort of puts Whitman in the regional context in the broader region. So who lives in Whitman? Excuse me. 89.2% of the town is white alone, which represents approximately 13,510 individuals. Among the minority populations in Whitman, 339 individuals are Black or African American alone, 124 are American Indian and Alaska Native alone, 149 are Asian alone, 2 or more races is 678, and then some other race alone is 346. The reason why I include the demographic data is just so that I'm holding myself accountable to making sure that we are connecting with the various community members that call Whitman home, and or use the various open spaces, recreation spaces that we have in the community. So I'm not naive enough to think that I'm going to connect with all 15,000 people, but I'm going to try to make sure that I'm connecting with as many people as I can to make sure that, again, their various needs or priorities are represented in the plan. So total households is 5,701. That comes from the 2022 American Community Survey. Of this, of 57 approximate households, the population has grown just over 7.5% between 2010 and 2022. Households have increased 11.5%, and in Massachusetts, the population growth is just under 8.5%, 8.33%. So the population that's impacted by a disability in the town of Whitman is approximately 9.9%, or 1,493 individuals. These folks are impacted by a disability such as hearing difficulty, vision difficulty, cognitive difficulty, ambulatory difficulty, some self-care difficulty, or some difficulty that impacts their ability to live independently. This is important because as we seek to protect, expand, nurture, sort of steward open spaces, recreation spaces, making sure that the folks who have some sort of disability are also able to utilize these spaces. And that's why the ADA assessment is a really big part of this, making sure that our public spaces are accessible for all residents, whether they have a disability or not. So I mentioned that there was a open space and recreation plan that was done in the year 2000. These are the goals that were identified as part of that plan. After this PowerPoint, there's going to be an opportunity to sort of workshop some things. There's maps. I have a chart paper for some other additional questions. using this as a learning opportunity for us on the OCPC side to learn from the community members who utilize these spaces, or if you don't utilize them, why not? And how might we sort of increase accessibility or usability of these spaces so that more folks might find themselves enjoying them. So from the 2000 plan, the first goal was to better maintain, manage, and develop existing open space and recreation resources. The key objectives here was the development of Hobart Pond swimming area, improved access and signage to increase use of existing open spaces, an upgraded town park, and sort of strengthened historical character around the town park and Whitman Center. The second goal, linking Whitman's open space with that in surrounding communities. The key objectives here were integration with Abington Strawberry Valley Golf Course, extension of Flaherty Trail into East Bridgewater. For those of you that don't know, are folks here familiar with Auburn Street between Washington and Bedford, Route 18? So if you're traveling away from the 18-14 intersection going up towards Washington Street, there's a house with cows on the left. The Flaherty Trail is across the street from that. And what it is sort of like a single, like in-out trail. And there was this opportunity at the time, or thinking at the time, to extend that trail into East Bridgewater. And then any possible enhanced connections to Brockton's Washburn's Meadow. The third goal, better protection of water bodies and aquatic habitat. Key objectives here were completing Bear Meadow acquisitions. I did write Bear Meadow down on one of these maps because I have questions that I want to hear from you all regarding sort of opportunities to think about Bear Meadow specifically. Streamline acquisitions and access improvements where possible, and then peak hole access improvement. The fourth goal, expand open space and recreation holdings. So have the town acquire more recreational and open spaces for the town's holdings. This would be done through providing some usable open space in or on edge of all neighborhoods, and creating more pocket parks or tot lots serving all ages. Fifth goal, preservation of Whitman's visual and historic character. Some objectives here were preserving the scenic open, non-forested areas, farmland, in ecologically significant areas, and then preserving historic landscapes and what's referred to as places of the heart. Places that sort of inspire some level of familiarity or connection to the residents in town. 6, preserve and enhance wildlife resources. The key objective here was preserve or enhance greenways or ecological linkages between habitat areas. And then lastly, providing recreation opportunities for all ages, abilities, and interest groups. Some key objectives here was developing walking trails with steps or handrails in key areas, increased handicap accessibility, which would be done through removing obstructions to otherwise level Flaherty Trail, for example, and providing safe but challenging non-intrusive opportunities for rollerblading and skateboarding. As I mentioned, there is a survey that's out there. Your input on the survey is important. We have approximately 120 responses, but hoping to bump that number up a little bit. And so if you have taken the survey, talk to neighbors, friends that you have in the community. If they don't live in the community, but they use the town park or some of the walking trails, urge them to also take the survey as well. The survey is tentatively scheduled to close November 9th, I think it's a Friday. But if we see sort of like a steady stream of survey responses, I can leave that open a little bit longer. Any questions real quick on what was presented before we move into the workshopping session part of the public meeting? So of these goals, any of them sound that they should be kept in an updated open space recreation plan? Any that, you know, maybe it might have been important in 2000, but maybe it's not important now, or if it's not listed here in terms of a key objective, but speaks to one of the broader goals of maintaining, managing, developing open space, linking the open spaces together, protection of water bodies, we can certainly add to this list in terms of key objectives. So, like I said, I've designed this to sort of be more of a listening session and workshop where we sort of learn from you as like users and key stakeholders in the neighborhood as the experts on these things. I'm just writing it. So I want to make sure that what we put there is truly reflective of what the neighborhood wants and needs. And you might have noticed I say we, I live in Whitman. My wife and I bought our house in 2018. So I'm a neighbor. So really interested in sort of hearing from my fellow neighbors around what their priorities are for open spaces. So just real quick on these objectives, anything stick out in terms of